interview episode, you get to meet Jerry Dugan, a king in the podcast space with over 400 episodes on his show, Beyond the Rut. Today, we start from scratch together, walking step by step through what Jerry's situation looked like as he quit his well-paying corporate career and filed for his LLC to start his business. Take notes on how he approaches networking, learning, and creating connections with other business owners and leaders intentionally. I also really appreciate his transparency when it comes to the financial conversations he and his wife had as their savings dwindled before his business actually started paying their bills. If you're interested in getting paid to speak, there are bits about how much to charge, what questions to ask, and how to negotiate your speaking fee within an organizational budget. Now, on to the interview. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today, Jerry. I am so excited to see you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yes, coffee is still in my system. So I shouldn't yawn a whole lot. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. So I did get to see you a few weeks back at the WOW conference here in Dallas. Super excited to see you there. There was a little bit of talk there about my favorite concept, abundance. Would you take us backward a couple years and share with me what you thought abundance meant?
I got it in my head that abundance meant I had to earn a 7-figure income. And it didn't matter what I did. I just had to earn a 7-figure income. I had to have net worth. And I at least knew enough that, my family wasn't worth sacrificing for the money. But I still had this goal that I was chasing, 7 figures, never quite reaching it. And finally I just realized, wait, what if that's not the thing? I'm sitting here talking about money's not the only thing in life, and then I'm defining my success based around a dollar amount. And so that's where I was even just 3 or 4 years ago, or even 2 years ago. So it's been a more recent revelation and evolution in my own self to say, it really isn't money that defines us. Money's a tool. That is it. Get that healthy relationship with it and move on. And so that's what's allowed me to do what I'm doing in the past couple, year and a half.
Yeah. Okay. So take me fast forward till now. Tell me what you've been doing the past year and a half, and tell me what your definition of abundance now is.
Yeah. So at the end of 2022, my wife had moved up to Dallas from Corpus Christi in 2021. I was already up here since 2019 for a job. The job was like all the things that are supposed to check the boxes. So everything in my podcast is about, defining success on my own terms, not based on somebody else's dream. For some reason, we threw that out the window in 2019. I took a job that was a director level position, 6-figure income, the most our family had ever earned. When my wife moved up here, we sold the house. It was during the housing boom. So our little rinky-dinky 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a 2-car garage that just got remodeled made us a pretty penny. So we paid off the car loans. Both cars were paid off. All our credit cards paid off. And we had left over, and we just said, well, let's put that in the bank for now until we decide how to invest it. And what we didn't realize is that a year after that, at the end of 2022, I would realize that I was burning out for my job. So great title, great income, but the work environment, great organization. I still love the organization. I think I would go back if there's a certain change in a specific staffing position. So people are going to my LinkedIn profile like, who is he talking about? No, don't do that.
Let's not do that. Let's not do that.
That's what the story is about. But yeah, at the end of 2022, I went to Podcast Movement here in Dallas, and I had just signed up to be a client with selfpublishing.com. So they were going to help me self-publish a book based on the podcast because 7 years after that show, we still hadn't, it was just me at that time, still me at this time, still hadn't done the year one bucket list item for the show, which was to publish the manifesto of Beyond the Rut. So now I've kind of like drawn the line in the sand, said, I'm going to do this. Here's my accountability. Here's my money. Take it. I made that decision because I had a 6-figure income, lots of disposable money, but I was committed. Did not expect that a week later when I went back to work, a certain somebody I reported to was going to kind of lose his mind. I guess stress got to him. I don't know what, but the guy felt like he had to exert control, and he did and said some things that caused my entire team to say, that's it, we quit. Boom. And so I saw basically 3 out of 4 people quit within a 6-month window. And I was left with the decision of, well, really the problem of how do I rebuild this? Because I can't just throw this back on my leader. He's not going to hear it. He's not the problem in his eyes. I was too weak of a leader, all those things.
Lots of blame happening there.
Yeah. Oh, so much. And this is the kind of thing where in that window, and really in 1 year's time, I had gained something like 60 pounds. So I went from weighing 175 up to 230 pounds. I was not sleeping a whole lot, and I thought that was because I was a combat vet. It's a PTSD thing. You know, we don't sleep a lot to begin with. But I went from sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night down to 2 hours a night. And that was a common thing. And so how was I functioning? Probably lots of coffee. And I just wasn't doing well. And here I am mulling over, how do I refill these positions? What's the story I tell the candidates on why 3 out of 4 jobs opened up in 6 months? How do I tell them honestly, this is my leadership style, here's my credo. However, this is what you're also getting into. And people picked up on it. I would get phone calls from candidates who were like, hey, after talking to the leaders in the second round, I decided I'm going to withdraw my application from the position. So I couldn't even fill the job.
Wow.
And so I was faced with all that a week after Podcast Movement. And my wife just said to me, Jerry, quit your job. I want my husband back. And when she said that, I was like, wait, what?
Excuse me?
Yeah. And so like on the show, we always talked about the 5 F's: faith, family, fitness, finances, and future possibility, in that order. And here's my wife telling me family's at stake here. She wants her husband back. I haven't been around for a while as me. And so we dug into that, and the decision was clear: quit the job. And when I said it without hesitation in that conversation. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, really. I'm going to go into the other room, type up my letter of resignation, and I will send that thing off tomorrow morning, first thing, after I talk to HR. Because I want to give them a heads up. This is what I'm doing. Here's why. Here's what I predict will happen over the next 30 days. Because I was in a leadership role, I had to give a 30-day notice instead of 2 weeks. My hope was that I would be let go right then and there. And no, they took all 30 days. But my wife was like just blown away by that. And she's like, well, what about your career? I'm like, the title never really mattered. And the income, it's just money. We can go out and earn money in a lot of different ways. What matters is that I'm here and I'm present, I'm with you, and that I'm healthy enough to be around for our kids and our grandkids when they have those. It's not worth this career ladder. You know, I can't lie to people. And I can't lie to myself. And this is where I am. And she's like, okay, cool. So I trust you. And I said, great. And then we're like, okay, now that we made that decision, what does this entail? Like, what do we have in savings? What do we have in reserves? What do we have in retirement funds? And so I did the math, and I said, look, if we don't touch savings, we got 2 months to play with. And I was like, I just said that. Wow, that was kind of cool. So that I was like, but I was looking at money not in terms of my value was tied into this dollar amount. It was tied into what could we do in life because of this money. And so, yeah, just what we had in fluid funds was like 2 months. If we dip into the emergency savings, we can go out till, this was like October when I was leaving my job, we can go out till March 2023. She's like, great. And then what? I'm like, well, then our income tax return comes in, and that gets us April and maybe May. She's like, cool. And then on top of that, if we cash in on this fund and this fund, it was like an investment fund and a retirement fund. I was like, if it comes to it, because when I decide to get back in the workforce, it's going to take me 3 to 6 months to land that type of role ever again, or I have to step backwards or maybe do something altogether. And so we really had a plan, like worst case scenario, we would be covered through 2023 in some way, shape, or form if nothing else panned out.
Wow.
So that's where we were when I left my job. And we had a game plan. It was like, all right, take the rest of 2022 off, rest. I mean, you got to heal from this guy you worked for.
Yeah.
And then decide what you want to do starting January. And I talked to 3 different people. Never met them before, but they were connected to me through some church connections we had. And it was almost like one of those allegories where like I'm struggling with something and then I get put in touch with like 3 people who've been on a similar journey and they help me see something about myself. So 3 independent conversations all said, hey, in listening to you, you're called to create. And, you're talking about finding another job, but deep down, like your emotion, your passion is coming out when you talk about your podcast, you talk about your book project, you talk about being a public speaker, you're talking about doing workshops and helping leaders define success on their terms so that they live a life worth living in their faith, family, and career. I was like, you got all that? They're like, yeah. And so what do you think? They're like, look for a job if it comes down to it. But if you have up until the end of 2023, don't tell your wife I said this. I'm like, okay. Launch, do the thing that you're called to do, figure it all out, make it happen. And if you have to, drive Lyft, drive Uber, do Uber Eats, wait tables if you have to, get the income to cover your bills, but keep the flexibility to work on the business. And I was like, all right, cool. Okay. And so that was the end of 2022. And I'm like, Liv, I think we're starting a business. She's like, okay, I trust you. And so I filed for my license, started BTR Impact, and she's like, what does that business do? I'm like, I don't know yet. I know it's going to be the business arm of the podcast. The money revenue from the book sales will go there. Any speaking engagements, it's all going to funnel in through here. But how do I define that? I don't know yet. I'm going to go camping. Off I go. And so I went to Big Bend National Park with a friend of mine. Cowboy camp, slept under the stars, met a coyote, not the smuggling immigrant kind, but the one with 4 legs. Yes. Walked into my camp and wanted to be my dog and be adopted. I'm like, no, you got to go.
We do not have any more hot dogs.
Yes. And my other dog won't like you, and neither will the cats. And he left. I was like, that worked. Anyway, that total side story. But so that was the end of 2022 going into 2023. And my look at abundance is really around being with my family, being close to my wife, having a roof over our head is really all we need. And the flexibility to go where we want, when we want, how we want, and know that we're taken care of is just, it's enough. And then the abundance part is now start building up something where you can bless others. And I'm like, well, how big does that have to be? And the answer I keep getting on my heart is keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not being defined by a dollar amount. I'm just being defined by how I interact with people, how I engage with people, help people, and most importantly, how I'm sticking around with my family and staying engaged with them. So yeah, very different.
Wow. Okay, so there's multiple directions I could go because you had so much in that story. First thing I'm hearing is how there's almost, and I've heard this in other interviews as well, there's almost like 2 different levels of abundance. At one point, you sit back and you look at this term that we initially think means 6, 7 figures, all the money, all the investments, all the things, more money than God. And then, at some point we step back and say, you know what? Like abundance really is just bare necessities, the roof over my head, being with my family, having just enough, whatever that means. And then we start to say, okay, now that I have enough and I have these things kind of checked off, then it would be nice to have extra, right? So it's like this twofold definition there. The other piece that I'm hearing that I think is unique to you, most corporate folks, I don't think, have a podcast, especially not a long-standing show that you've been producing for so many years, so that when they leave corporate, you actually have this really robust network that you've created intentionally or not to start your business on, basically. You have this very clear concept of this show that you've been producing for a long time, a book idea, workshop ideas, I'm sure, to kind of, it's like your jumping off point is a little bit different. You're still starting from scratch, but you have at least some level of a foundation of a network, like I said, to start. So talk to me about How did you start? Where did you start? Okay, we're going to start a business. I filed my LLC. Okay, what's your business do? I don't know. And where'd you go from there? How did you decide what to do first?
Have you ever pictured yourself having your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we can do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs start podcasts to market their business since 2019. I coach you through branding, structuring your episodes, workflow, and recording your podcast. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so that you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles too. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show.
I think the easiest thing was because I had already signed up with selfpublishing.com that I was going to write my book. There was already that challenge of, well, we got to make that money back. How? Well, through speaking engagements and book sales. That's how.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a week later, quitting the job, my wife was like, "Hey, do you get that money back?" I'm like, "No, there was like a little no refund thing. We're committed." She goes, "Okay. So when are you going to work on your book?"
Yeah.
So we knew that had to happen. And so that book was getting published one way or another. And I did need a vehicle to be able to kind of protect the revenue coming in from it. What revenue would come from it? I mean, I had some realistic expectations that most books don't sell 1,000 copies. And I think I'm just at that mark after 1 year. So I was like, all right, cool. That works. So I knew I had to do that. I had to create that. And I asked, I forgot who I asked. But, it was a former coworker of mine from another organization because I knew she's got her corporate job, but she has a side hustle business. And so I asked her, like, hey, do you have an LLC? How did you create that? She's like, I just went to LegalZoom. I'm like, oh, okay. And I still had money. I was like, file that. Boom. So I paid the $300 something to have LegalZoom, file for my business. Mm-hmm. And so, when I got that paper in the mail and the email, I'm like, that is so cool. I'm bona fide.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was on the camping trip where I met the coyote on 4 legs, that's when the message had come in that I was now a registered business in the state of Texas. And I thought, wow, that's so neat. Now what? And then that's when those conversations came with those 3 guys I told you about. I'm like, okay, well, I'm at least going to start with what I already have, which is the podcast. Mm-hmm. How do I monetize that? I never monetized the podcast after 8 years at this point.
Oh.
It was always a passion project with 2 friends of mine. The 2 friends had gone on to do other things other than the podcast. We're all still friends, but I was the only one still in the podcast. And now I got this book. I'm like, what do I do with that? I don't know. And so folks came out of the woodwork, like they knew about my job transition. And so I got to talk to like Jared Easley, and we talked some ideas through. And he gave me a lot of encouragement. So that was really cool. Jody Mayberry from the Jody Mayberry Show has a networking group that he just handed off to somebody else named Mike Simmons. But the Phoenix Club was really big on like, we're just a networking group. And if you're looking to meet people in the business space who are speaking and making a living off of it, there's like a lot of like retired Disney executives in this group. I'm like, yeah, like who? And he's like, well, Lee Cockrell, Dan Cockrell, Mike Simmons, Jeff Barnes. I'm like, I know all those names. He's like, yeah, they're in the club. I'm like, where do I sign up? And how much is it? He's like, it's $39 a month.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
Take my money. I'm like, and this is all factoring in my head. Like the numbers I gave my wife included, what if I have to spend this much money on the business to get it up and running? And so I wasn't too worried about doing this. I knew the cushion we were playing with. And then Vincent Puglisi reached out to me from Total Life Freedom. And he was like, he had just come out with a book called The Wealth of Connection. I'd gotten to read it. I interviewed him on my show for a second time because of that book. And it was just, he saw my post and he's like, hey, I saw you left. What's up on the horizon for you? And I told him, and he goes, cool. Hey, let me bounce this off you. And he told me about his network and his membership and who's in that. I'm like, that's the club. So I joined that. And so I wound up joining like 3 different membership groups. The third one I was already in, Christian Podcasters Association. But now my conversations there are shifting to, what do I do to turn this thing into a business? And I started asking the right questions around that. So putting myself around people that were doing it or building it was really helpful to start shifting my mindset from hourly, or I was a salary employee. So the biweekly paycheck to providing something of valuable that's scalable, that'll provide income for myself and my wife and not have any type of cap on it. So in the corporate space, there's kind of a cap. There's only so much an organization's going to be paying to a leadership and development guy, a leadership development guy, I should say, or learning and development guy. It's like, man, a 2-decade career, and I forget what it's called.
That's okay.
And so, like, there's kind of a cap of what people can earn on that. And so, again, not defining what success will look like monetarily, I just don't want a cap on it. I'm not going to put a limit on what God can do, kind of thing. So, yeah, those guys really started helping me shape my mindset towards that, and not thinking paycheck to paycheck, but thinking, providing value, connecting with people, and what is the thing you do. And then I also joined the Capshovians through capshow.com because I needed a way to leverage, I needed help, but I didn't have the money for a staff or for virtual assistants or anybody. So it's still me producing the show, writing my book. How do I leverage tools that'll be like having a staff, but not? And so AI became a very valuable tool as a starter.
Yeah.
AI is not a replacement for people, but it's a great augmentation to you if you got to act like 7 or 8 different people. Yeah. So some of the tools I had in place, all by January, these are the tools I had in place. I had 3 memberships going where I was learning from Vincent Pugliese, Jody Mayberry and his group, and then Eric Nevins and his group, and then Deirdre Shen from Capshow. Those are 4 groups I'm learning from, and they're bringing in all kinds of resources, and it's just blowing my mind. It was like a fire hose of insights. And then as far as tools, I signed up for podcasts through Adobe. They've got this tool that enhances the audio. So if somebody has a lot of echo in the background because they're not using a microphone, I can run it through Adobe for $10 a month, and it makes it sound like they're in studio with me.
Awesome.
I'm like, what? Capshow took my audio and converted it into show notes, transcript, posts that I could use on a regular basis because I was really horrible about show notes, titles, you name it. And so Capshow took my own episodes, my own audio, stuff I owned, and gave me stuff to start from. So it used to take me almost 3 hours to write show notes. With a tool like Capshow, I do it in 30 minutes now. And it's big time saver. So what do I do with the extra 2.5 hours? I network, get to meet people. I think about the business some more. And I start to realize that about 4 or 5 months in, so about March, April, that, what's his name? Pat Flynn always says that the riches are in the niches. When you niche down, because Sun Tzu, I'm a big military history buff. And I don't know if you remember that trend, every man thinks about the Roman Empire at least once a week.
I saw that and I was like, what is going on?
Yes. Did you ask your husband that?
No. I was like, I don't have time for this.
The trend is over, but ask him anyway. My wife asked me, she's like, hey, Jerry. I'm like, yeah. How often do you think about the Roman Empire? I was like, well, remember when I went rucking with my friend Mike this morning at 5 a.m? She said, yeah. Well, we're coming back over the overpass and we see the water treatment center. And we thought about how did the Romans treat their water and their sewage back in the day? And they had aqueducts, they had sewer systems, and we're literally like a retired Marine and an old Army guy talking about the Roman Empire and their sewer system as we're walking over a water treatment center. And I told my wife 2 hours ago, that's how long ago I had a conversation about the literal Roman Empire. I forgot where I was going with that, but, history buff, big military history buff. Sun Tzu, The Art of War, said, he who defends everywhere defends nowhere. And the idea being that if you take your military and you try to defend 360 degrees around you, you've diluted your capability so much that it doesn't take much to conquer you. Somebody just drives right in with a smaller force, and then from the inside, they just rip you apart. Kind of dark and morbid. I'm sorry.
But it makes sense. Yeah.
So in podcasting as well as in marketing, the person who tries to market to everybody really markets to nobody. And that was such a huge connection for me, that aha moment. And I realized that my show, even though I have a very specific avatar for Beyond the Rut, which is a male Christian, 35 to 45 years old, married, has children, has all the boxes checked of success, but feels stuck in a rut because they're not really living out their dream of success. They're living out somebody else's. So we want to help that person define success based on their faith, family, fitness, finance, and future possibility. What's on their heart, not what is on somebody else's heart.
Yeah.
But my episodes were just sort of like, hey, you got a cool story? Come on board. Hey, you ran a marathon? Come on in. Oh, you're a business person? Great. Talk about that. And it wasn't really specific to what does my avatar really need? And once I started to niche down at that, then I started to get some clarity. And that was AJ not only has this need, AJ works as a manager or director in a corporation. And he is so swamped at work, he can't even think about the 5 F's outside of work. So what can I do right now to help AJ? And at that time, we were dealing with quiet quitting, the great resignation. My team had just done that to me, and then I left my boss. And I realized I have the skill set to help leaders create the type of work culture where people are going to stay and thrive. And if I can help leaders create that, then I can help those same leaders start to look at the 5 F's in their lives and create that life vision. So what is that life worth living in their faith, family, and career? And that was that big aha moment for me. And I finally realized, oh, I need to niche down even more. So my business needs to niche down what it does. So I went from this broad stroke of I help you create goals for a life well lived to, no, I help leaders boost their workplace culture so that their employees are more engaged, accountable, and perform at a higher level so that you have higher profitability, lower staff turnover, happier customers, all that. So that's what I do using the tent framework for leadership, servant leadership. And people are like, man, that's very specific. I'm like, yeah, I teach one framework, has to do with how to engage with your employees so they don't quit on you. And if you do that, then we'll talk about other stuff. And so I created a keynote around that, a workshop, and just more recently a group coaching program. But I was talking with my friend Vincent the other day because I built all this off of a keynote presentation, which might be a bad idea. So some people did great at this. So a lot of speakers who are able to leave their corporate job and go right into a speaking career, they were speaking on the side for years. I think 4 or 5 years, 3 years, whatever Larry Roberts did, that number. And that seems to be the average, about 5 years to really get seen enough while working a full-time job. And then you're able to leave your job and go into speaking full-time. I didn't do that. I left my job and then said, I'm a speaker.
Yeah. Get me on stage, people.
Yeah. And I only had 3 friends come forward and say, I want you on this stage in September. Another person said, yeah, January. Another person said May or June. And so I had 3 or 4 speaking gigs, paid speaking gigs. I think a total of 4, maybe 5 in 2023.
Yeah. That's still awesome, though. So many people get stuck speaking for free for so long and can't figure out how to, get over that hump and get paid for it.
Yeah. And I went the other route. I just immediately went out to my network of friends in the healthcare space specifically and told them, I've got this talk. It's 60 minutes long. If you need a keynote speaker for your organization for the next leadership development session you're doing, let's talk. And then I just had to figure out, how do I price this? Because people I just reached out to know I've never charged outside of my corporate job before. So turns out I was undercharging quite a bit. And so if anybody wants to become a professional speaker, the question that has helped so much is not to just spit out what your speaker fee is, but to ask them, the person calling you about a speaking engagement, what's the budget we're working with? That'll help me come up with a solution that'll best fit you. And so you still have your number in your head. What you're hoping for is that the number they say for their budget is at or higher than what you had in mind.
Right.
And my friend Larry Roberts, he shared this with me. He's got his normal fee. It's a lot higher now than it was when we talked and had this conversation. But at that time, his speaker fee was like $5,000. Yeah, we'll just make that number. We'll pretend that was the number, 5,000. He goes on the news, talks about AI. A local school district reaches out to him and says, hey, we'd love you to come in and do a professional development for our teachers. It's just a 1 hour, you do your presentation. Can you do that? He's like, yes, and I could do it on that date. Great. What's your fee? And he said, well, it's normally $5,000, but you're a school, so you're probably like nonprofit, plus you're like 200 yards from my house, so I can do it for about $1,500. And they're like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. You're so generous. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And he's like, I did a good deed. I made this person happy. But then the next line came from this lady. She said, I was worried you were going to say it was something higher than $10,000. And if that was the case, I would have to go to my principal, who would have to go to the superintendent and get the school board to approve that amount. But you're well within our budget. Yes, let's do this. That's it. He did the speaking engagement very graciously for $1,500. So not only could he have doubled his speaker fee in that moment, he gave himself I think 75% pay cut, almost. And so he was the one who told me, whenever they ask if you can do this, the question you ask is, what is the budget we're working with? And that goes the same for if it's to go and consult with somebody, to bring somebody on as a coaching client. That's the question you want to roll with, because what you have to offer may be priced higher than what they're willing to do, and you can work something else out. In the speaking business, I think I did one where their budget was a lot lower than what I was hoping. So we worked it out where it was like, hey, how about you buy everybody a copy of my book? And this is the price of the book. And so I got what I wanted, and I got to boost my book sales, like 150 copies, I think it was. And they loved the talk. So
that's great.
Cool. So I had to learn a lot around pricing, a lot around confidence in my pricing. And that took all year.
Yeah. Well, I know for sure that there are business owners 5 years in who are still working through the mental drama of how to price my services and worth and worthiness and what my time is worth and, what is the benefit that I provide in exchange for this price and all of those questions. So I still feel that you learned quickly. I want to ask you, because you joined 4 networking or something like that, 4 networking groups right away. How do you properly leverage those connections? Give us some follow-up tips, like how you help them as much as they're helping you, and then still walk away from all this time you're spending at these meetups and turn around and implement everything that you've learned. I feel like that's a big challenge for anybody, whether you're talking local networking or conferencing or anything like that. It's always this challenge of, okay, well, I met 100 people this week. What do I do?
Yes. So the cool things were, I think I mentioned earlier that, it opened my eyes up to different perspectives, thinking more like an entrepreneur as opposed to an hourly or a salaried person. And so I was gaining that and gleaning that. The other thing was I was really thinking around like an offer tree. Vincent talks about like a stadium of products. Like you have your core offer. This is like the one thing, my bread and butter, I'm known for it. For me, I rested that on a keynote presentation, and then all my other products come off of that. Other people, they do a group coaching program, and then their speaking and training workshops come off of that, or their e-courses and so on. But more specifically to the connections in the groups, that might have been one of the things I didn't leverage enough or well enough. I kept an eye out for people who'd be a great podcast guest, and that was really a habit of the last 8 to 10 years. That person would be a great story to tell on my show to inspire my audience that I finally niched down with. But at the same time, I didn't really think about like just network to network. And some people like poo-poo on the idea, like, well, you don't have time to just chit chat. You got to make sales. So just find the people who are looking to buy and move on. And I'm like, that sounds cool in the short term, but you're not going to build relationships for the long term. And so that kind of advice I got from somebody just didn't sit as well. It wasn't from one of these 4 groups. It was from somebody else. But the consistent thing I started to pick up on from these 4 groups was that really get to know the people in the group. Like, don't try to sell them your product. Just get to know them. And once I started doing that, and once those group members started doing that as well, I started referring business to people and not even asking for business in return. Just like, oh, this person's doing a transition in their career. I know a guy that does just that. This person is in the learning and development space like I am. They want more development around their learning and development career. I know a guy who has a group around that. I didn't join it, but that's because I finally ran out of money to start doing. I couldn't do a 5th
You were already
group. I didn't have the
maxed
time
out.
or
Yeah.
the money. Yeah. And the guy was like the 5th one to come around. I'm like, dang it, if you had just asked 2 hours sooner, I would have signed up. And I'll still go and join it because I've had to do some reset. But the biggest thing was just, I would advise folks, if you're going to join a group, take the time to like see who's in the room and reach out to them. Don't spam them and keep marketing your stuff to them, but say, hey, Virginia, we met in Pod Pros.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw you on a Pod Pros thing or a Pod Talks thing. I don't know. I'm making that one up. I met you sooner than that. But, hey, let's meet up for a virtual coffee sometime because everybody's spread out. They're not in the same city. And then you just have 15 minutes. You talk to them. If you want to track them in your CRM just so you remember to follow up again in a month or 2 or 3, that's fine. But don't look at those connections as a sale or not, or a client or not, but really look at them as just a connection and learn how you can serve them. And from there, you'll see they'll do things like these guys all joined my book launch team. So I had like 100 people on my launch team back in March of last year, 2023. And I was like, where did I meet these guys? Half of them I used to work with, but the other half came from these new groups I was in. And because I was connecting with them, they joined me and they helped write like 59 reviews of my book in the first 2 weeks. I was like,
That's amazing.
what? Yeah, the goal was like 50 or 25 or something like that. And so they really helped. And on occasion, those guys will still plug my book for me. And I haven't actively plugged it in a while.
Yeah.
Getting referrals from them now. Somebody reached out to me, I think 3 weeks ago and said that his best friend from his hometown is looking for leadership development for his team. And so we had a conversation with that guy. And so that's the best thing to do with these groups is not just go for the content, throw yourself in the hot seat. If it's a group coaching kind of format, volunteer to get in there. Don't be in there every single week and hog it. I was in one group where a guy pretty much made 0 progress with himself for 6 months. It was the same question, same problem. And it was like, this guy's not going to get it.
Yeah. He's not doing the homework.
Yeah. But we let this guy take the hot seat every single week because none of us want to throw ourselves out there. And so I threw myself out there just to be on, just to get that guy off the stage. I'm like, all right, this is what I'm dealing with. Boom. And I was like, wow, that's profound. And then that would encourage other people to get in the hot seat. So get your money's worth. If there's a hot seat, put yourself in it and be honest. Tell people what you're facing and, ditch the woe is me attitude. Like, you're there to grow. They're all there to grow. They're there to network just like you. And so whatever shell you might be in, I'm an introverted extrovert. So I like being around people. Like that conference, the WOW conference, I was so out of my element. Like, I saw you there and I saw Larry there and I was like, I know people. And then from the two of you, like there was, what's his name? Joshua from the Gen Zer, the conservative Gen Zer. Like all of a sudden I'm talking to him like we're best buds. But that's because I had somebody grounded that I can like kind of just draw energy from and say, bam, and start talking to people. And same thing with Larry. Like whoever he had around him, I would just talk to them like we knew each other forever. But the reality is, once you or Larry walked away, I was like, I don't know any of these people. And so that's, something about me that people may not know just by looking at me is that I am extroverted, but if you throw me in a big crowd, I am just scanning there's also a little PTSD stuff in there, but I'll tell y'all later. So I'm always also scanning the room for danger.
Yeah.
But as far as connecting with people, like I gotta kind of warm up to folks. But once I do, it's like, boom, and I'll talk to like 15, 20 different people. My family, they crack up because like leaving church, I have the goodbye tour.
Oh yeah. You got to tell all 100 people goodbye that you saw today.
Yeah,
Yes.
they forgot I was even there,
Yes.
but I got to tell them I'm leaving.
Yes. And, even in a conference situation, which I wish I kind of knew this about you ahead of time because I would have been more conscious of it. And there were several people I could have introduced you to. And, just full transparency, that's something that I'm even trying to work on, is definitely an introvert. So even driving to an event like that, or any, we've met at Podcast Movement before, which thousands of people are there. This was a smaller conference of just 100 or so. Any event like that, even if it's a small networking event of 20 people, driving there, I am, double checking my tension and my body. I'm concentrating on my breath. There's different thoughts about like, oh, is my hair okay? Is my makeup okay? Stuff like that. But it's all this like prep to be around people for me because I'm just so much more comfortable in quiet, alone, just a peaceful, quiet setting. And so when I walk in somewhere like that, it's like, bam, you got to turn on, be ready to chat, have your chin up, like introduce yourself to people, be bold. And so even at a situation like that, there were some people that I knew, but I definitely could have just pulled you around the room and introduced you at least to a few of them. So this is the other thing too. I don't always remember people's names, but I can walk up to someone and say, oh, hey, how have you been since we met at blah, blah. And as they are talking, then, I'm jogging my memory. What's their name? What's their name? What's their name? And I'm trying to get better about that, but it'll usually come to me. Or I can say, oh, hey, this is Jerry. And then this person will say their name. I'm like, oh, phew, okay, good. Like now, got it.
I do that too. It's rare that I forget a name, but in college, I used to remember people like where we met 4 years ago. What was the context? Who was there? And I learned that's kind of creepy, and I had to tone that down.
Oh, but I wish I had that.
I don't have it now. I'm a lot older now, but 18 to 20 years old, I was like, memory like a sharp razor edge type of thing.
Yeah. I am working on being a better connector, though. So I love that you brought that up. So I shared with you earlier that this morning I met with a smaller business owner, just starting out. And, my first question is, where are you finding customers? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay. So clearly that's where our breakfast conversation went, was kind of a grassroots operation of how to find leads, where to find them, what to do, how to reach out to them to even initiate the conversation. And I was getting the sense from her that that was a really scary step to just, find someone online that you think is an ideal client and have the guts just to email them or to call them. It is a cold call. That is a little bit scary. But when you're offering a valuable service and it's in alignment with their business, I was explaining to her, this isn't as cold as you think it is, because you can learn a lot about somebody on social media, online, read their about page. I mean, you can really do your homework so that when you have that conversation, you might surprise them that you know a bit more about them than what they thought, but you can lead with connection pieces that okay, like they have kids. Okay, well, I have kids. Our kids are probably about the same age, or, different things that you can pull into the conversation. But what she was struggling with, and where I'm going with this, is how you said, establish that connection and get to know that person first before you're really expecting them to buy from you. Like, you're not necessarily selling your services directly to this networking group. Yeah. Work your connections, connect them to other valuable resources, and the sales will come in a few weeks, 3 months, 6 months. Some business connections circle back a year later for me and my business. So how did you balance needing some sales, honestly, right away? I know you did have savings and all of that. But what about when maybe money was running thin, or if someone is in that situation where they don't have the savings, they need a sale right away versus being able to wait for 3 months? How do we figure that out?
Because that's kind of where we landed about a month and some change ago. My wife and I, we had gone to like tap into the last little bit of reserve that we had. We knew that would give us till about March or April of 2024. We're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll do this and we'll make money back. It's just money. Again, not defining myself by that dollar amount anymore.
Yeah.
But then we found out the hard way that money was never really ours. It's what my previous employer put out there to say, this could be yours when it's vested.
Oh.
But that was kind of tucked away. Like we didn't know that until we tried to cash it in. And then we found out, man, if I just stayed at my job one more month, that would have been ours. I was like, ouch, that's like the 10% bonus I walked away from because I just needed to get out of there. And so I shared that with my wife, and it was a scary moment because we were down to like our last, I think, $5,000. So like enough to get through one final month of business and living expenses. And we're like, well, I could go look for a job, but if we're talking about a job that replaced my income that I had before, we're looking at a 3 to 6 month window before, even if I got hired today, it's going to be about a month before I'm onboarded and we get the first paycheck. So that's not going to work. And ideally, it's going to be 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. If we double down on getting to know people, share what we do about our business, and not get desperate, that's the key thing, is to not get desperate. And something Vincent has shared with me and a couple other people is that when you're low on money, you'll start making desperate decisions with your business, which will hurt the business. It'll hurt your relationship with your customers. And so you want to know what your core is and what your worth and your value is, and not compromise that, like die on that hill kind of thing. And so what we landed on was that we need money now because we won't have some pretty soon. But we also need flexibility because I needed flexibility to be able to either do job interviews or talk to customers and market and still be able to speak. If I got picked up for a speaking gig or a workshop or a coaching client, I needed to have that flexibility to take care of them. And I couldn't if I just grabbed a 9-to-5 job. And so we're like, okay, that kind of goes out the window. So what we wound up doing is I started driving for Lyft. And I was like, we got a car.
Okay.
We can put gas in the car. We have insurance. Found out the hard way that insurance went up in 2024. So I'm a little mad about that still. That hurts. And yeah, we figured it out. Like, I'm already up early in the morning. So for me, the best time to drive isn't what they tell you in the training. They say drive on the weekends, drive at events, drive on the holidays. I'm like, no, that's when everybody else is driving. So you don't get a lot of people riding with you.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be up at 4 a.m. I'm already up. So instead of just dilly-dallying and reading, I jump in the car and I drive to like 9 a.m. And in those 5 hours, I earn, I'd say, about 70 to 80% of the goal that we need to bring in each day just to cover our living expenses. And then I get home by about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I run the business. I'm marketing. I'm reaching out to new prospects on LinkedIn. I'm booking 15-minute, virtual coffees with my network just to tell them what I'm working on. And then I do a little bit more to build the courses and the workshops that become part of the ecosystem I've put together, and market got an upcoming workshop. And I started going to actual local networking events just because they're easier. I found the free ones that have business people there. And that has been opening doors for me. And in the evening, by about 4 o'clock, 5, jump in the car for 2 or 3 more hours just to get the goal for the day through Lyft. And I'm home by about 7 or 8 o'clock. And my wife was like, well, I'll take up cooking. And I'm like, and I feel kind of bad about this because I never want to be that traditional husband that comes home and the wife's cooking dinner for him. And but that's what we've had for the past couple of months. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. And she's like, this would be even cooler when you don't have to, work for Lyft.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But again, the flexibility is there. In fact, when we saw each other at the WOW conference, I did some driving that morning, then went to the conference. And by then, though, I was fried. I was going to do some driving on the way home, but I was like, just go. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
So that's taking care of our living expenses, which has allowed me to focus on keeping the business going the way it's supposed to. And because funds have dwindled, I was wasting a lot of money, and I was okay with it because I was in a comfort zone. So I went from one comfort zone with my corporate job, and I created a whole new comfort zone, and that dried up, and found myself asking these questions like, did God really put it on my heart to start my own business and to build this framework and to start talking to people about workshops and keynote? Or is that all just my pride? And every time I asked that question, I'd get that answer like, no, you're supposed to do this. Don't compromise it. Make it happen. And so all these different lessons were coming together. But yeah, I mean, find the side hustle to support the side hustle. So I don't know. I was thinking of like some cool, catchy 30-second soundbite there. But so, the primary thing is to get the business going, to keep its momentum going. Identify where you're wasting money. I did. And I scaled back on tools I hadn't touched in like 8 months. I was paying for QuickBooks, but for what I do, I'm talking about like, when things are running the way they should, we're talking about maybe 3 or 4 checks a month. Maybe. I don't need QuickBooks to track all that. So why do I have to pay $60 a month? Why do I have to pay them $800 a year just to retain them for tax purposes? I can hire a local bookkeeper, keep the business local, and get the attention I need at a much lower price. And so like I was making better decisions over the last 2 months about the business and just started scaling back on tools I don't need anymore. The ones I really do need that I'm hooked on, I'm working out arrangements with them. I'm like, all right, I'm going to run out of funds on this date. What can we knock out before that date? And then this is my plan to reinstate you guys. And they're like, cool, we can knock out these projects for you by this date, but stay in touch with us. Let's talk, let us help you. And they've really helped me with my sales. So like my sales skills kind of suck. Like I'm good at teaching people stuff and training people and inspiring people. I don't know how to close people. Like I'm not that yet. And so I'm just like, yeah, cool. It's there if you want it. Go ahead and, let me know. And then I walk away and it's like that person could have been ready to hire me right there on the spot, but I never stopped and I never just let them think about it and give me an answer. So people have been helping me with that. So all that to say, if money is tight, go find a thing you can do right now with what you've got. I talked about Lyft. That's fine. And take a couple weeks just to explore Lyft, or, that's one option. The national average for Lyft earners is like $15 a month or $15 an hour.
Not bad.
And I think that's when you factor in gas costs.
Okay.
Or no, I think that's raw. So it's lower, I think, with gas. I'm netting somewhere around $23 to $24 an hour. And then after gas, it's like $19 to $20 an hour. Mm-hmm. So you just kind of find where are the pockets, what's the best time for you. And for me, it was 4 o'clock in the morning until 9 a.m. in the morning. Get home, do the business, and then wrap up in the evening, get home again and rest.
Yes.
and take a nap if you need to, take care of you. And so that was one thing. The other thing is I went on Upwork and I've done a couple of side gigs doing voiceover work. I'm a podcaster. I've got a microphone. I've got a home studio. I narrated my own audiobook. So why not have somebody pay me to narrate their YouTube channel? So there are a couple of fake news stations out there. You might hear my voice.
That's awesome.
It's kind of cool. I'm like, that's me. Oh, I could have pepped that up a bit more. I could have done that. But, it's like $25 a video or something. And I'm like, it's quick, easy money. I already got the studio set up. I just spend an extra 10 minutes recording their script, clean up the audio, send them a file, and it comes out to about $25 an hour.
Yeah. You're being creative with tools you already have, a setup you already have, skills you already have. You already know how to edit audio and things like that. So the car you already have, all these things. It's just being creative so that you're not stressed about money or so that things in your personal life don't fall apart so that you can focus on the business. Because I think that's the hardest part about getting started is that when you have these other factors that feel stressful, your focus is on those things rather than what's my next offer? Where can I look for my next speaking opportunity or whatever the new group program is or whatever it is that you need to be creating. So with that, tell us what your speaking topic is, what you're looking for, the ideal group that you would be in front of, just so that anybody listening can look up Jerry Dugan and book you. And then mention your podcast and your book and where we can follow you.
Awesome. Yes. So the speaking topic, the title of the talk is Stake Your Leadership Tent, and it's how to boost employee engagement and performance within 90 days and beyond. And it's geared towards two main audiences, well, three really. HR leadership teams. So organizations where you have HR leaders together because they are often in charge of leadership development. Healthcare leaders, because my experience has predominantly been in healthcare, although the principles in my talk really impact any industry. I have an affinity for healthcare and healthcare workers. So organizations that have leaders from healthcare. And then the third one is any leadership organization. So a friend of mine, he is the general manager of a textile services company, for example. He and I were chatting about how do we provide some resources for his young staff of managers. Well, he's also connected with the Montana State Textiles Services Association. Didn't know that was a thing. But all these different textiles companies, they're the guys that do like linens for event centers and hotels, uniforms for companies. Those doormats that when you go in through the entrance, well, there's a company that comes and picks up the dirty ones and drops a new one. It's like, where did they get that from?
Oh,
this textile services company takes care of that. So anyway, that to say, he's working on getting me connected with the folks over there in Montana so that I can go up there for their next annual conference and speak there. Don't know what the date is again. I think it's like next January or something. So yes, so leaders and HR people.
Okay.
Those are the big two audiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
Podcast is Beyond the Rut. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify. I guess YouTube now because Google Podcasts went away. And the website's beyondtherut.com. The book, Beyond the Rut, because it's based on the show. And it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and a couple other places. And the audiobook is available wherever you can purchase an audiobook.
Yeah. Thank you. And tell me your social media handles or where we can follow you and find you. Is it beyondtherut.com?
Beyondtherut.com, you'll find everything there.
Okay.
So I'm on Instagram, sort of. I'm usually just lurking on Instagram, so I'll like your stuff if we follow each other. Once in a while, I'll say something silly because I don't think I really ever say anything serious. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. So if you look up Jerry Dugan on LinkedIn, you'll see me a lot on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, and real quick about social media profiles, thinking about where your ideal audience would be, I think LinkedIn is probably the best place for you to spend any social media energy whatsoever would be there, because that's where you would be in front of various leadership, C-suite type of folks that are at these larger corporations that might be interested in having you come talk. So that's a big piece of the marketing puzzle, is being careful where you're spending your time on social media and making sure that you're in front of the right people. So I think you've got that down. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. I didn't realize that until like 2 or 3 years ago.
And a lot of people still don't. They're like, oh, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is. And I'm like, okay, well, but are those people who are viewing your content, are those clients? Have you gotten clients from there? What's happening? and a lot of times the answer is, oh, no, I guess maybe, whatever. Like my ideal client is so-and-so and so-and-so. And I'm like, okay, well, those people are probably on LinkedIn. So at least you're in the right spot.
Yes. Somebody at a podcast movement told me when they asked who my avatar was, and I told them, they're like, and you're on what, Facebook and Twitter? I'm like, yeah. What about LinkedIn? These are like professionals. I'm like, oh, yes. Oh, wow. And ever since I made that shift and then cleaned up my LinkedIn profile, the engagement on posts is way higher than on anything else. And just connecting with people, not just like, hey, I got a bunch of likes and a bunch of views, but like really engaging with people as they comment, but also reaching out to people who liked it. I'm like, hey, I saw you like this post. What stood out to you? And getting that conversation going. And none of it geared at, let's jump on a sales call.
Yeah.
Like, it's just sort of like, if it seems like it makes sense to get on a call, I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to hear more about what you're talking about. Can we get on a 15-minute phone call or Zoom? And we'll do that. But even then, it's not like, if there's if there's an opportunity to make a sale or to help them through a sale, then we'll have that conversation. But most of the time I'm just like, what are you up to? In fact, one person I'm meeting up with on Monday, I was prospecting, but she's thinking about leaving her job. And I'm like, cool. What are you looking for? Like, are you looking to leave your organization, change careers altogether? And would you like an introduction to a couple of my friends who are headhunters and who place leaders in healthcare? And she was like, yes. And so I made the introduction, and then something came up in the introduction. I was like, there's something more here. Like, why is she looking to leave? And I'm like, hey, I have more people I could probably recommend you to, but can we chat on a call? And again, no intention of like, you will buy this $6,500 program from me.
Yeah.
Like, that's not there. And she trusts me enough in just the 1 week I've known her through social media to share with me what she's going through. And maybe there's a way to help her with what I have, but that's not the goal. Like, it's just to help her. And then she may pay that back. She may pay it forward. Who knows? But yeah.
I love that. And thank you so much for talking me through all of this today. I think the value that you brought is just this really honest, holistic view of how to network well, how to get started, how to have these conversations without feeling or being salesy, but knowing that the connection that you make could lead to a sale. It could become something. So hopefully, I hope that someone hears this episode, or several people hear this episode, that have a need for your speaking services, and we could just get you booked for like a talk a month or something. That'd be so cool, right?
That'd be so cool. If somebody does an Amy Cunningham on your show, that'd be so amazing.
That would be so amazing.
Amy who? We had a guest many years ago. She did a talk on compassion fatigue. Somebody thought that Brandon and I, the hosts of my show, were her agent. Oh. So they reached out a little upset that we were hard to find and demanded to have her booked for their thing. So we reached out to my friend. I'm like, Amy, you need a website. Just set one up and call this lady back. She wants you at their state conference. And she went. And then that led to like 7 other speaking gigs for her. And then we came back. We're like, Amy, you owe us a 10% referral fee maybe? Is it too late to ask for one?
Did you already spend that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She now has her own website. People go directly to her for gigs. But
amazing.
Yeah, that would be cool if that happened. Like if somebody reaches you, Virginia, where's this Jerry guy?
Yes.
I need a book.
Yes. And even just sharing your story, I shared with you that's an intention of mine, is to connect people better. But even as you're talking, I'm thinking like, I know so-and-so in HR, and I know this and I know that. And like, maybe there's something even that I can do.
An introduction.
Yeah. So just sharing your story is so valuable. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Virginia.
Absolutely.